crazy people in New York talk to themselves in the street, and if you looked at the two of them, they looked so bizarre, but they didn't really. I mean, not when you consider the East Village, but the person who walked past them looked far more conservative than they did. Never mind.
I thought it was a joke.
It wasn't a joke. It's not a joke. It was a true story.
Oh.
It actually happened.
God, I was getting ready for some big punchline, you know?
There's two punks. One's purple hair, one's black hair. So anyway, this businessman walks by. I'll finish it. Businessman walks by. He goes, which one of you said that you wanted the egg cream, then a gem spa? So anyways, we all walked over to Gem Spa, had an egg cream. David!
Is David a good joke teller?
Well, he could make up an ending.
Oh, really? We rolling?
Yes.
Okay.
Let me finish squinting and rubbing my eyes and picking my nose. You know. Okay.
Whenever you want to take a break, just let me know.
Okay.
Whenever I want to take a break, I'll just let you know.
I'm ready.
Okay. Let's do this. Yeah? Okay, whenever you're ready. Okay. Brian, what kind of music did you listen to when you were growing up?
Well, I had my very first influence, my very first record that I ever bought was the first Beatles album. It was the one on the VJ label. I think it might have been the import, actually. I was only about 6, 7 years old, I guess, and I bugged my parents into getting me that record. That was the first record that I ever had.
And what struck you about that record? What was it about that record that...
The guitar was larger than life. I just thought all the Beatles played guitar. And, excuse me one second. Hey, Kenny? Kenny!
Kenny?
Kenny! You have to stop talking.
Yeah, right.
You're really kind of distracting me. I'm listening to what you're saying. Why don't you guys go in the back? Kenny! Why don't you guys go in the back? Yeah, we're going in the back.
Oh, okay.
Rolling. Wait a second for speed. Speed.
What sort of music did you listen to when you were growing up?
Well, the very first record I bought was the first Beatles album on the VJ label.
And what was it that struck you about that record? Why'd you...
Well, I thought all the Beatles played guitar, and I just wanted to play guitar. And just the image of the guitar just kind of sent me to the moon. That was it, you know. That was my number one thing on my list.
Tell me a little bit about where you grew up.
Well, I come from Massapequa, Long Island, which is kind of like a town on the water. It's like a seaside town, really, and it's the suburbs, and it's just kind of your regular American city, I guess. The only difference, I think, being Long Island separating from someplace.
Why the area that you grew up in was a little bit different than a lot of other places in America.
Sorry?
You were talking to me about why Massapequa is growing up there is a little bit different than growing up in, say, Indiana.
Well, basically it was very similar, I think. The only difference is you had Manhattan an hour away, which you got a lot of the outdrift from the city. It was a little more hip, a little more cosmopolitan, I guess, than growing up in more like it was less country. It was more suburban, I guess. But basically, it was pretty much the same. It was a nice place to grow up because we had the ocean. We had we grew up on the water, and we had boats, and we used to go fishing and clamming, catching crabs off the side of the dock. So it was a nice place to grow up, you know.
Did you when you were growing up, did you go into the city much?
In high school, I really used to go in a lot. I used to kind of cut class and take a train into the city and go to 48th Street and check out all the guitars. And then I'd head down to Max's Kansas City and spend all night there and come home late and get in trouble.
Was with the group of kids that you hung out with when you were growing up, were
All right,
they...
Kat, sorry, this battery system's going. This is the fun thing about batteries.
Rolling.
Okay, we're rolling.
Good.
You're on the bus.
On the bus. Rolling Thunder.
I want to talk to you a little bit about what kind of kids did you hang out with when you were growing up?
Well, there was kind of two parts of of my neighborhood. You had the kids that were from the south of the tracks, down in the water, and they were the kids that had the money. Then you had the kids that were north of the tracks, and they were just like the regular kids. And I lived in a community that was south of the tracks, but we didn't live in the water. We lived in the middle of the water. So we were just kind of regular. You know, we weren't low class or high class. My dad worked for a living. He was a construction worker. Just a regular type of family. And basically I grew up with kids that played instruments. Those are the kids that I hung around with because we were always in bands. Starting from probably when I was about 12 years old, I had my first band. And I just went through bands all the way through high school.
What sort of music did your first band play?
My very first band? Okay. One of my very first bands, well, first of all, I had a custom amplifier, like Creedence Clearwater. It was like it was Silver Sparkle with the padding, and I had a Rickenbacker guitar. And we did everything from Johnny B. Good to Creedence Clearwater Revival to the Allman Brothers. We covered a lot of Allman Brothers songs. We did kind of hit records that at the time, whatever was popular, whatever kids wanted to hear. So that was like the first wave, one of my first bands.
How did that band and the sort of stuff that you were doing, and from what I take it was just a variety of all kinds of stuff. How did that then develop into the Stray Cats?
Well, there's a lot of other material that I played in between all that. I mean, I pretty much experimented with everything. I played Eric Clapton songs just because, you know, I thought he was a great guitar player. Robert Plant will hate me for saying it, but we did Led Zeppelin covers like every other band. And eventually I just kind of stumbled upon this sort of rockin', not 50s music as you know it as being popular 50s music, but the real rockin' 50s music, which was called rockabilly. And I just heard it on the jukebox one day. I heard Gene Vincent.
Sorry, but we're gonna change tape. It's not the batteries, it's the tape.
I'm rolling. Go ahead with your question.
We were talking a little bit about audiences on the coast as opposed to America, as opposed to Middle America. How does it affect your performance?
Well, the crowds aren't really any different. Sometimes they come from different backgrounds. They look a little different sometimes. We had a fantastic show in Cleveland. I mean, that's a rockin' city, and it doesn't really affect your performance. You know, I mean, as long as the crowd is there, I mean, you know, I sure don't care what people look like as long as they're rocking.
You're rocking around. How do you write a song, Brian?
Well, you know, usually I come up with a riff first. You know, The Night Feels Like Justice. That riff just kind of popped into my head. Where it comes from, I don't know. It just kind of happens. And then I'll usually write a song around a guitar part. That's how it usually works.
And the lyrics come later?
Yeah, lyrics like a spark has to happen. There's got to be something has to happen, some kind of friction or some kind of story you think would be interesting to tell. Whether you know it can be about hot rods or you know it can be about an illegal border crossing. You know, it could be anything.
Let's talk about that one for a minute. Let's talk about Maria. How did you get inspired to write that one? How did you get together with Stephen?
Well, I've got a thing about borders. You know, I don't know what it is. It's just like the image of like a fence, a typhoon fence that runs in the middle of nowhere along the California, Texas, Mexican border. It's just like a real strong image to me. and it's like just nothing around it. Just this typhoon fence with holes cut through it that the people come back and forth. The same thing when I visited Berlin for the first time. That's probably the most ominous border. Streets are just cut in half. Houses just stop. And, you know, there's just this big wall that separates existences, and it's just two different governments. People are virtually the same people. So I think that theme runs a lot throughout the album, this border theme. It's on the album cover, it's on a lot of the songs. But getting back to Maria, I mean, I kind of was fascinated by this whole border problem we've got, and how these innocent Mexican people just come up kind of to work for the day, and they go back home, and a lot of them just get murdered or killed right on this no man's land, which can't be patrolled because it's too rugged. It's actually United States territory. Anyway, I met a girl who ran into Texas. She like virtually ran from Mexico, and the story was just so wild. I just wrote a song about it. Just all the stuff she went through.
Now, it's interesting, this fascination you have with these borders. Let's analyze this for a moment. Have you ever lived near a border?
No, I don't know what it is. It's one of those stupid things. I just find it like, some of them, like, what gives man the right to like put a border on land? You know, I mean, it's like, I mean, he didn't make it. You know, why can't we travel back and forth freely? You know, and I guess that's part of it. But it's deeper than that.
Yes.
Why, when I was young?
We'll be getting to the bottom of this later. Are you politically aware, Brian? How important is it to you?
Well, I am somewhat politically aware, probably not as much as I should be, probably just as much as everyone else who reads the papers every day. Some of the issues are, I think, really important and really pressing. And I think you should, at least the way I feel about it, is some of them should be written about, and you should say some things about them, but you shouldn't get preachy about them. So that's where I feel you have to draw the line. You can have your own viewpoints, but when you start imposing them on other people and start preaching with them, that's when I think you pass that line.
Do you think that music can change things?
I think it can, to an extent, yeah. Because there's such an impact, and so many kids listen to what you're saying. I think it can, to an extent. Although, I do think bands flatter themselves that think that they're the ones that are going to do it, and that they're on this high, holy mission. I don't think that's the case.
What do you think about somebody like Jackson Brown, whose music is very political now? Do you think that's good?
Well, I don't know, I think Jackson Brown probably has a lot of integrity. I've never met him, but I don't think he would write political lyrics just for the sake of being current. You know, I think he probably has some things he has to say.
What about somebody like Bob Dylan? Were you influenced by him at all?
Not growing up. As a matter of fact, Bob Dylan called me up and asked me to play on his record, and I thought, wow, why would Bob Dylan want me to play? And it was really strange because someone had played me a couple of tapes that he didn't use on a flight, on an airplane flight about a year before he called me, and it was a song that he had recorded but didn't use called "Clean Cut Kid," and it was just a great song, and it was really cool. I thought, wow, I mean, I'd like to do this song. And then when I got down to the studio, that was the song he wanted me to be on, and that's the song I played on. It was really strange.
Wow. Probably has something to do with borders, I think.
That's some stuff at borders.
Right.
What about, and let's expand on this, on Dylan, and how old were you in the 60s? Were you old enough to know what was going on for it to have any effect on you at all?
Well, not really. I was born in '59. So, I just have memories of like child. I have some good and some bad memories. You know, good memories just growing up and playing guitar and getting in bands and growing up. Bad memories like my dad being out of work and having some pretty hard times and having to sell the house.
Do you It seems as if, for those of us who are older, as if during the 60s, a lot of people were, when you talk about somebody like a Dylan or a Baez or even the Byrds, a lot of the music was social protest music, and it seems like the musicians really cared about what was going on. They were trying to make a statement. Do you think people are doing that today?
Well, I don't know if it's ever really died. It just seems to be out in the forefront again because it seems that the problems of the 80s are paralleling the problems of the 60s, although they're almost totally different ones. The 70s just kind of went by and not too much good or bad really happened. It seems like maybe rough times are ahead again, paralleling the 60s.
What do you think about the events that happened last year about Live Aid and then Farm Aid? Do you think they were good?
Yeah, I think only good can come out of that. Well, I played on the Farm Aid show, and John Mellencamp kind of asked if I'd like to do it. And I thought it was a really good cause. I hadn't been aware of it. And the only thing is, I think it raised public awareness. I don't think it makes too much of a dent in the actual problem. In other words, it's not a solution, but it sure didn't hurt.
Do you know? It didn't hurt at all. It didn't hurt at all. Do you think that, why do you think it is that Farm Aid, even though it was right here and it was something that affects us daily as Americans, why do you think it didn't get the recognition that Live Aid did?
Well, I mean, Live Aid, there's pictures of little kids starving. It's right in front of you, you see these little kids, they're dying, I mean, if you can't feel for them, you're just made of stone. And the farm problem is a more complicated thing. Why are the farmers losing all of their farm and their property? I mean, Chuck's a farmer, and Chuck would be a good person to talk to about that. That's a deeper issue, and it's not as tangible.
How well do you know John Cougar? Do you know pretty well?
Let's see. We're not exactly good friends, but I've known him for a couple of years.
Do you think his music has a lot to say about America and what it's going through right now?
I think his songs are running through my head. A certain aspect of America, yeah. Yeah, I think he's speaking for a lot of people. Yes. I'm just trying to really, his songs run through my head. I'm trying to give an intelligent answer. I think John speaks for a lot of people. He doesn't speak for everybody. But I'm a fan of his. I really like his songs. And, sometimes I think the problem with people is they just get a little too serious, I still like to drive down the highway and have a great song pop out of the radio at me,
Yeah, I agree. It's strange, I was just sitting here while you were answering, and I was thinking about John Cougar growing up in Indiana and his kind of music, and you growing up on Long Island and your kind of music, and how much, and Willie being from Texas and his kind of music, how much, I guess, your geographic location really affects you.
That's a good question, because if you're talking music, Long Island is pretty barren.
Yeah.
It's the brunt of a lot of people's jokes. I don't know why that is, actually. It's a beautiful place. You've got Manhattan an hour away, the ocean. The east end of Long Island is some of the most exclusive part of the world. The Hamptons and all that. But there is, as far as culture coming from Long Island, there is not a native music source like there is Texas, you know, country music. Although if you were to go to Memphis or a place like that today and you ask an average kid what rockabilly is, they've got an Iron Maiden t-shirt on, they don't know and they don't care. I mean, you know, it's like the Rolling Stones playing the blues. They're English. I mean, it didn't start there, but they're probably the best, one of the, you know, well, it's been said, they're probably the best rock and roll band around, you know. So I don't know how important it is geographically to be cornered, being bordered into a type of music there, Pat. Being, you know, you have to play this type of music because you're from that area, you know. I mean, Dylan even, when I play with him, he even told me something about, well, I said, you know, it's funny how, you know, I can't please the purists because I'm not pure enough when I play rockabilly, and the critics say I'm too derivative. And, you know, Dylan just laughed and said, well, you know, I've had that my whole life, you know, being from Minnesota and not pure enough, and I'm not singing the way Jimmy Rogers would have sang it. So I don't think that there's a geographic importance to music. I believe it's a universal language. I really do believe that.
I think you're right. Let's go back a little bit. Long ways, actually. Let's go back to Hank Williams. Did he have any effect on you? Are you a Hank Williams fan?
My dad was a Hank Williams fan because when he was in the Army, he was stationed in Korea, and he ran into a lot of country guys, and they played these Hank Williams records. And my dad, I think, grew up with like doo-wop music, and he's, you know, he went to like the Brooklyn Paramount. And, you know, they're from the New York area, and that's the type of music he likes. You know, slick city music, Cab Calloway up to the, you know, the Five Satins, and those doo-wop sort of bands. And he didn't really know that type of music. So I had Hank Williams albums around the house when I was a kid. And I really liked the rockin' Hank Williams. That to me was real close to what rockabilly became. Move It On Over, Hey Good Lookin'. All those songs to me are kind of real early rock and roll. They're even past country.
Yeah, I think he had a lot to do with developing rock and roll in the 40s and the 50s.
Yeah.
It's interesting talking to Christopherson about him yesterday. He brought up a point, or a side of Hank Williams that I had never thought about.
We gotta change battery.
Okay. Okay.
Setzer Slav.
What time now?
Okay. You set?
15:21. Go for it.
Okay. Are we rolling?
Yep.
Speed?
Yep. Everything.
We're talking about Hank Williams, and we're talking about the South, so let me just make a great transition here.
Alrighty.
You just played some dates with the Thunderbirds.
Yeah.
How would you describe the Thunderbirds music?
Well, I would just call them a great rock and roll band. I mean, because they get labels thrown at them like I do. Rockabilly, Texas Roadhouse Blues, Jump Blues, you know, I mean, there's labels upon labels upon labels. They're just a real fun, good rock and roll band. And me and Jimmy have the same idea when it comes to what a guitar should sound like. There aren't many people that really think like that. Most people, I don't know, we just kind of like that sound that's beyond twangy but not too distorted. Most people just turn the whole thing, everything up to 10, and they just play it. And he's really concerned with his guitar tone like I am, and we're two fusspots.
How many guitars do you play in a show?
Well, I've narrowed it down to about 4. Too many.
You were just talking about, no, let me ask you a different question first. You just described them as just a good rock and roll band. Well, what is rock and roll to you? How would you describe rock and roll?
Well, I mean, they're just sweaty and... Well, that's what rock and roll is. It's just... Oh boy, that's a hell of a mouthful of a question. I think it's just combining all the elements of what you've grown up with, all the elements of what you like personally as a musician, all the imperfection and all the flaw when you clean up rock and roll too much, it ain't rock and roll anymore, you know? All the flaw is what makes originality. You know, have a different voice. That might be, you know, it might not be perfectly in tune. It might be rough and scratchy. That's what makes, you know, rock and roll individual and distinctive.
Is it totally American rock and roll?
Oh, there it is, drawing borderlines again, you know? I mean, I have to say, it was invented here. Most art forms, from blues and country, jazz, and all its subdivisions, rock and roll, rockabilly, were invented here. But people have taken them, you know, I mean there are great bands that are I think U2 is a great band, one of the great bands of the 80s, and they've come out of Ireland, and there's just no border that you can put on that type of thing, you know, because people have, anyone with soul, anyone with any kind of heart can create something worthwhile, you know, it doesn't matter where he's from.
Yeah, but don't you think though that if it hasn't been for the Hank Williams and the Chuck Berrys and the Little Richards and the Elvis Presleys and the Eddie Cochran's, I mean, do you think that there could be a U2 today? I mean, without America giving birth?
Okay, can we hold that thought? Sorry, because we're going to change tape.
Okay. Gosh, all these changes.